Hi, this is part 4 for creating a progress bar that increases each time an asset is loaded before moving on to our main scene. In this tutorial we will actually get this progress bar up and working and also componentize the actual progress bar itself. So let's get to it. Okay, so our first job is to actually componentize this loading progress bar. Shouldn't be too much of a problem, it requires some refactoring, but let's go ahead and do that now. So what I'm going to tackle this is actually collect all the consts and the variables and place them all together in one place. So now our variables are together in one place. What I'm going to do is create the progress bar as a separate object. To do that, I'm going to pass a const. I'm going to call it progress bar and I'm going to give it a blank object to start with. Now I'm going to have to move all these const as properties of this object. But the thing that I have to be careful of is that anything where we're actually calculating the size depending on another property, then this will have to be done separately. So we can move those out now. So we move this percentage font, which is calculated from the loading font size, out separately. So we will initialize the value to null and separate that out down here. The same for the box and the bar. And again, we set those to null. Now going back to the object itself, I'm going to have a function in here called init, and that will initialize any of these properties down here with their desired values that I've moved. Now those lines of code that I've just moved, I'm going to move them into this init function. And also I can actually set the x and y in here as well. So in this function I'm going to pass in an x and y value. I move the x and y into here as well so they're initialized. Now we're going to have to use the words this dot x. X will become a property of this object. We also need to add x and y as properties. I'm just going to set those to null at first. Now we've added the x and y, we must remember to actually place this on the beginning of each of these properties to make sure that they reference the properties of the object itself. We also have a small problem here in that we're actually referencing this. When this is pulled out into a separate file, then this won't be actually referenced to anything to do with phaser. At the moment this is phaser.scene. It's actually the scene itself. So I'm going to pass in a scene parameter in here as well. And I'm going to change this .ActiveGraphics to scene.ActiveGraphics. And for completeness underneath, I'm going to actually show how to actually call the progress bar to initialize the values. All we do is call progress bar.init. We've got past the scene, which is the phaser scene that we're currently in, so that's this. And also we need to pass in the x and y. If you remember before, it was this dot cameras dot main dot width divided by 2 and this dot cameras dot main dot height divided by 2. Probably wondering why I don't actually run this instantiation actually in here. At some point I want to make this be able to be instantiated from any x and y position on the screen. Now we can actually start getting all the rest of our const into the actual object itself. So now we've got some of the consts in here as properties of the object. We've now come down to the loading text, and this is being created from the scene itself, so this is going to have to be instantiated as well. So we just move that to the init, make sure we use the words this in the correct places, place loading text into the properties as well, and set it to null. And we'll do the same for the percentage text. And again, making sure we use the scene in the this.make.text, because we're passing in the scene, we know that we can use that as the phaser reference. Now we almost have all our properties in there. We just need to pull in the actual progress properties themselves. And again, the completed value has been derived from two values, so this needs to go into the init. And remember to put this on front of each of these properties. We next need to add a function to actually display our progress bar itself and what percentage it covers the actual box. So going down the bottom, we can add another function. We're going to call this render for the time being. And in here we're going to actually place the render function for the progress bar itself, which is here. We now need to deal with the actual box itself and when that is actually filled to the screen. We'll place it inside the init function. And remembering to place this on front of each of the properties. Okay, so that's the box and the bar dealt with. We now got to deal with the text. Again, we should be able to just copy this into the init function. We now have one line that shouldn't be here, that needs to be moved, and that's the percentage text, where the actual text is set. So we need to move this and place it into the render. And remembering to add the words this. And then just look back to make sure we haven't missed any, like here. Let's just quickly reformat our code and then have a quick check down to make sure we haven't missed anything. That all looks good, and what we're missing is we need to call the render function. And that should initiate the progress bar itself. So let's see what we got. There we go. It's worked first time. So now we can actually call this for each of these files that have loaded, and that's what we'll do next. So at the moment the progress bar is a constant, so therefore it's not accessible within the crate where we're actually doing the file loaded and passing in the file. So we need to make that accessible for the time being. Now I will be placing this into a separate file, so for the time being I'm just going to change const to this. So it's this dot progress bar. I'm going to update all the other progress bar calls themselves. So that's still working fine. So that's all working fine. Let's go back to the code and start getting this bar moving. To get the bar moving we have to count the amount of assets we have. Now to count this object I need to cycle through the object itself and count each of the arrays that are sitting there from the keys. So I'm going to use the for in for this. Go for const asset item in asset manifest. I'm going to create a variable for the count, initialize that to 0. And then I'm going to do count plus equals asset manifest, pass in the asset item, and read the length. And what we should get, if we console out, you should get the count of each of those array items added together. There we go, there's 12. So we've got 12 items to load. And we can double check that by looking at our assets file. So we've got 11 here, we've got 0 to 10, and one more in our images. Now what we want to do is set the progress bar count. So the item to load count, we want to set that to the amount of items that we have. But we want this completion value to be calculated on the fly each time we loop. So let's move this to a separate function. And we're going to call this function step. And we'll just paste it in here. So going back to our count of assets, so going back to our count function here that counts the assets, we need to initialize the item to load count, which is the amount of items to load, with our count value. And also we're going to set the item loaded count, which is how many items that have been loaded, to 0. You may want to change the names of these because they're a bit obscure. So I'm going to change item to load count to file count. And the item loaded count to loaded count. And that should have renamed it in each of the places that it's found. So I'm just going to change them here. And I typed in this, then this should be not this should be this dot progress bar dot file count. We're going to hit a problem here in that because we've initialized the value to 0, if we look at when we render the width of the bar, you'll notice that this dot width times this dot completion value, which will be 0, because this is calculated in our step, this dot loaded divided by this dot file count, then this value is going to be 0. So when we actually minus the padding off here, the bar will actually move backwards because it's the minus value. And we can see that if we save this, and you can see the bar has gone to the left. So we just need to make an if statement in there. Now looking at the code, we're going to have a problem. If the completed value comes back as 0, or if its completed value is null, then our bar is going to actually run backwards. If you look here, the bar will be filled, and then we have this dot width, so our width is 300 times this dot completed value of 0, so width times 0, 300 times 0 is 0, and then we're minusing the padding, this dot padding times 2. So what we'll end up is the bar will be running backwards. And we can just save this and test it. And there you go. So the bar is actually running backwards there. So to resolve that, we can jump into here and say if this dot completed value doesn't equal null, and this dot completed value greater than 0, then we'll do the fill bar. But we still want to do the percentage set text. And around there, we just want to make sure that that is not equal to null. So this dot completed value equals null, and then we pass in 0. Otherwise we do this dot completed value times 100. And just change those quotes. And there we go. Back to where we was trying to increment our step. So we've got our step function. So what we need to do in here, where we've got console.log file loaded, is also add this dot progress bar dot step and this dot progress bar dot render. What I do want to do is in the progress bar dot step, I want to increment that counter. So we just add this dot load account plus plus. At the moment this is at 100%, so let's give this a go. And there we go. That was actually a bit quick. That's because we haven't got many files in there. But we can test this. Jumping back to the code, removing those, and pasting those two commands above. Let's just step this twice. So 2 files have been loaded. There we go. So this bar is actually loading. We can math round or math seal in these if we so desire. But that's how you would actually create a usable progress bar for asset management. The more files we have in here and the larger they are, the slower this will actually load. Now there's one thing you would noticed is that we've got this slightly transparent square here and the rest is solid white, and though we actually changed this to be of a transparent colour. So let's go and fix that, and that's all because that this bar has been placed on the screen but not cleared each time it's updated. Let's jump back into the code. So we look at the render. So before we start rendering anything, we need this dot bar dot clear, and that should fix our issues. And there we go. The bar is now cleared before it's rendered, and we get a nice transparent bar. So I think that's it for that video. In our next video we'll use Jest, the testing framework, to actually help us section this out into a separate component that's actually scalable, so we can have it whatever size we want and actually be able to use that in other projects. We also will integrate the game scene back in, and we'll do just a quick tidy up of the code and probably a review. Okay, so the next video will be quite short. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.